Yo! What's poppin'? This is Path of the Exiles, the series in which I play Path of Exile. I'm sorry, I just really like that introduction. I'm drunk, I'm drinking, and I'm continuing to drunk. Hopefully y'all are feeling pretty good. I mean, if you haven't watched all the videos up until now, I would highly recommend that you do so. Start at episode 61, because that's the first iteration of this kind of iteration, the Harvest League. The Harvest League is new, it's fun, it's exciting, and, you know, we're all getting excited over here. So, go watch episode 61 and onward if you want to experience me being drunk and talking about my personal life, my upbringing, why I'm here, the message. The previous video, I think, was one that you should definitely watch. I talked a lot about my childhood, my mother, a lot of that kind of stuff that I've never really talked about on the internet really at all, so definitely worth watching. The music at this current moment is Mega Man 5, Rockman 5, Complete Works. This is Gravity Man's stage in the PlayStation 1 remaster of the song. It's pretty good. So, this is Path of Exile. The series is called Path of the Exiles. Anyway, so I don't know what I'm going to talk about in this video yet. I usually just kind of let things roll naturally. You know, I just kind of like... when I figure out what to talk about, I figure it out, so... If anyone's got any ideas, I know this is pretty late in the series. I'll have probably finished the series by the time this video is uploaded. But if anyone has any ideas for future iterations of these videos, let me know. Just, you know, if you have literally any ideas. Like, hey, talk about, why don't you discuss, you know? And if it's a good enough idea, I might do it for Halo and Chill, where I'm not drunk. And I'm a little bit more coherent and potentially poignant with my commentary. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What should I talk about? I guess maybe in this video I'll talk about what led me to becoming politically active. That sounds like a good subject. So again, I'm assuming you've watched all of the previous videos up until this point, you know, of this iteration. Watch every Harvest League video. What do I do with this? Like, am I supposed to put an item in there? Hold on. But yeah, I'm going to talk about what made me become a political person. In just a second here. I mean... that one's actually not bad. That's actually not bad. I'll take that. But yeah, so... I would say Bernie Sanders, for me, is my biggest political influence. I mentioned a lot in the previous video. Hold on. My OBS is frozen. It's literally not functioning. Okay. Did that record properly? Encoding overloaded, it says. I beg to differ. Anyway, I assume this video is functioning. But yeah, I mean, even if the video stutters, whatever, it's mostly all the auditory content. The visual content's basically useless. But for me, in 2016... But yeah, in the previous video, I talked a lot about my childhood, my upbringing. And I talked about how I lost my house. And so I want to talk about what happened after that. When I was around 17 was when the house was officially gonzo. And I moved to Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. I was in the D.C. metropolitan area, so sometimes I say I lived in Maryland, sometimes I say I lived in D.C. I mean, it's the same shit. It was in the metropolitan area. With my mother's brother. And my mother's brother is a fucking piece of garbage, both of them. She had 2 brothers. Both of them are, without, you know, wanting to say anything too extreme in a YouTube video, the most disgusting, utterly repugnant individuals I've ever met. One of my mother's brothers is a rich, democratic, kind of like political machine kind of person that works with the military. And they've got a lot of money. A lot of money. But they had so much money that they had an extra house. And that's where we moved to. Because we lost our house and my mom asked him for help. And we moved there to his spare house. Now the thing about the spare house was it was unfinished. I did not have electricity in half the house, including the bathroom, did not have electricity the entire time I lived there. Keep in mind, I'm around 17. I dropped out of high school. At this point, you know, I'm 18 when I actually like get in the moving truck and actually like I'm 18 at the time. So I'm technically an adult, but like I had lived my entire life with no experience living by myself. I was just basically connected to my mother at that point. And so we moved down to Maryland. Again, Washington, D.C. area. And we move into my mother's brother's spare house. Unfinished. There was a room, I lived upstairs, and there was a room next to mine that was literally had no walls, had no flooring. There was a bunch of junk in there. And one of the other things was that house was infested with creatures like mice when we moved in. And that was something I had to deal with the whole time, because I'm not a carpenter. You know, I'm a fucking kid, dropped out of high school, no friends, no social skills. You know, I'm depressed. I've, at this point, tried suicide at least twice. I'm a fucking freak show. And my mother's brother said that they would help us, and that they would get me back on track, and everything would be fine. And I believed him. That was the worst part, is I fucking believed him. I put my faith in him. I put my trust in him. And at this point, I was already a streamer. I was already a YouTuber. I had already started doing that kind of stuff when I moved. But I'd never talked about any of this shit. But this is around, you know, I had a hobby, you know, and that was making YouTube videos. I was doing Twitch streams back at this point. But I tried to always avoid talking about my personal life. I had said that I'd moved, but I'd never talked about, you know, a lot of the reasons why. I didn't talk about who my family was. I wanted to be very private, and I still for the most part am. But, you know, again, I was taught, I was raised that it's not okay to be poor. And even as a YouTuber and a Twitch streamer, I thought it was never okay to be poor. And that was one of the things that, you know, a lot of the people that were my fans were lower middle or upper middle class to middle class, and they were giving me a lot of money. And this is around the time where I started to make a lot of money with live streaming. And, you know, we'll get into that later, maybe. But my mother's brother was a very troubled individual. And one of their problems was just very clear psychopathy. They were a federal cop. Now, y'all know if you watch my content now, I hate cops. And my experience with my mother's brother is one of, if not the most, one of the biggest reasons why I hate cops. And I've told this story before, but we're skipping ahead, we're fast forwarding to 2018 here, was when I got swatted. And when I got swatted, my uncle said that the cops were just doing their job. Keep in mind, the police beat my mother and threatened to kill her. The cops literally said in front of me, like, they said to my mother, we will shoot you if you do not get on the ground. She was a disabled woman. She had bad legs and she could not, you know, go from standing to the ground. She was like, you know, 60 years old-ish. And the cops pointed guns at her. And keep in mind, like, at this point, if you watch the previous video, you know my mom is mentally broken. And that was why I hate my mother's brother. Both of them, but mainly the one that lived here that I'm talking about. Because he told my mom that everything was going to be okay. And then he did nothing. And I mean nothing to help us. Besides bring us to another home. And this is around where I started to get very suicidal, very depressed. And I asked for help multiple times, and he said he would help me get on health insurance. He would help me get what I needed to see a doctor and a therapist, and he never did. So, like, for me, ages 18 and 19 was, like, basically my entire life. I just didn't have a childhood. I was never taught anything. And at this point, I wanted to become a YouTube person because my only outlet for being able to communicate with other people was the internet. And that was my main reason for becoming a YouTube person and then a Twitch person, a streamer, and that kind of crap. And I would, you know, I would spend all of my time speedrunning PS1 games, talking about video games, just ignoring real life. And then the 2016 presidential election comes along. And this is, again, how I got started in politics. So this is where it wraps around. The 2016 presidential election. I remember it was December 2015, I think, around that time. Where, again, my mother's brother was he worked with Democratic politicians and Republican politicians. He was a federal cop. Worked in the military, a total bootlicker scumbag, Hillary Clintonite person. And they were telling me to vote and to be they were like, when, you know, like when Hillary Clinton's response to the protests was vote. Like when George Floyd was murdered, her response to that was vote. This is the kind of person my mother's brother was. And he was trying to raise me to become like a clone of him in a way. And keep in mind, this was before I transitioned. I was an obese man at this point. When I was 18, 19, 20, I was 250-ish pounds. I was completely unhealthy. I'd never heard of protein before. I was still on my diet of ice cream and fast food and mixing, not eating for weeks and stuff. This is before I got my diet under control. And then my mother's brother told me to watch the Democratic debates. Or at least suggested, you know, like, oh, the election's coming up. You know, you're 18 now, you can vote. And I watched the first Democratic debate of the 2016 cycle at my mother's brother's behest. And I saw Bernie fucking Sanders say the things that I was like, you know, like, again, my mother's brother also, like, my mother and my mother's brother grew up poor, but my mother's brother went to the military, sold out to the machine, worked with politicians, became a fucking military person, became a rich person, millionaire, multiple houses. They had 3 to 4 houses. I don't know. I think they have 4, but I know for a fact that they have at least 3. But I'm pretty sure that they have a fourth. But they always hid things from me. But I've since done some research. But either way, I watch the first 2016 presidential debate. And I see Bernie motherfucking Sanders tell me that it's okay to be poor. And I'm like, you know, I'm like, you know, again, I've already tried suicide before at this point in my life. Depressed. The only outlet I had to the only hobby I had was playing PS1 games on fucking Twitch, right? Like, I'm an embarrassment. And I see Bernie motherfucking Sanders tell me that it's okay to be poor. Never since then, man. That was like, again, and that's the core message of this channel, is that it's okay. Not only, again, I say this a lot. Oh, Jesus, I'm getting really too drunk for this. But not only is it okay to be poor, it's normal. That's the default. Most people are poor. A majority, a super majority of people in this fucking country worry about when their next meal will be. And it's just... like, that's the thing. It's like, my mother raised me to be afraid of everybody. To never talk to anybody, to, you know, whatever. And then my mother's brother comes along and tells me, I'm gonna fix your life. And then I see Bernie Sanders say it's okay to be poor. He teaches me... yeah, this is really embarrassing, by the way. Like, the fact that I'm gonna upload this video, this is like, wow. But he teaches me that it's okay to be poor and that most people are poor. And I will always remember this conversation. The first political conversation I had was with my mother's brother. He asked me, like, you know, so did you see the debate? How do you feel about Hillary Clinton? And I was like, Bernie Sanders. Like, everyone should have healthcare. Like, keep in mind, like, when I was 14, I knew at this point that the fact that I had chronic illness as a kid was one of the main reasons why my mother ended up losing the house. And I felt guilty over it. I felt like it was my fault. I ruined my mother's life because I was born with chronic illness. And the system that we were living under told me that as someone with chronic illness as a kid, that's embarrassing and that's bad. So I was guilty. I felt guilty a lot. And so I told my mother's brother, it's like, I don't like referring to him as my uncle. I just want to, you know, I hate this person. Like, if there's like an ultimate supervillain in my life, it's this motherfucker, and I'll maybe get into this more in these videos. I don't know. My little life story may stop at any point. These videos are completely random, but I remember him telling me that universal healthcare will never happen. That poor people will always die. That it's pie in the sky, and Hillary Clinton is more qualified, and Bernie Sanders is garbage, and the things he advocates for are impossible. And he's trying to program me, but I'm like 18 now. I'm like an adult. I'm like, you know, in my teenage years, I read a lot of fucking atheist literature. You know, I watched a lot of libertarian shit. Like, I was at this point, I was skeptical of authority, but like, I wasn't all the way there. And then he told me all this garbage about how Bernie Sanders' ideas were impossible. And how there's always going to be people that die because they don't have healthcare because they're poor. And that I should be grateful to him for saving my life, because without him, I wouldn't have deserved to have a life. And this is the kind of shit that he would abuse me with. The kind of like shit he would program me with. Is that I'm your savior. I'm helping you. Don't question me. And that's like where it was like, and then I watched the next debate, and then the next debate, and then I was like, hold up, the music is looping. Come on, man. Holy shit, I cannot operate a YouTube window screen. But yeah, and like I was watching the next debate and the next debate, and I was like, you know, Bernie Sanders has a good fucking idea. Like, this shit makes sense. Yeah, it's okay to be poor. Yeah, it's okay to be sick. It's okay to be sick. You shouldn't be embarrassed because you're fucking sick. Like, why should I feel guilty because when I was 12 years old, I had a fucking chronic illness that led to me having a surgery when I was 14 that led to my mother not being able to pay for medical bills? Why should I feel guilty for that? No. Fuck that shit. It's not my fucking fault. It's the society's fault for putting me in this fucking position. And you know, my mother's brother would keep telling me, you know, we would have infrequent political, he would barely ever visit us. We didn't have a car, and this was a food desert, you know? The nearest grocery store was 2 miles away. It would take me like 45 minutes to walk to the grocery store, which I later ended up having to do because this person would not provide for me. And again, I'm not, you know, like, I was, you know, there's a lot of situations, and I wish I had developed this sort of desire to fight for myself and stuff. But I was, you know, again, I was raised really poorly. I would have rather not eaten for a week than go to the grocery store on my own because I didn't have money. And this was the other thing was, he kept telling me that, I need to get, like, a lot of things. I need to go to college instead of going to get a job. And he would actively kind of try to prevent me from getting a job. And then he would also then say, like, oh, I've got someone that can give you a job. And then never, you know, like, he would always string me along. And I would always think, okay, instead of looking for something, I can just rely on him. Because he would keep telling me, like, I'm here to help you. I'm going to figure everything out. Don't worry. But then, like, there would be weeks where he would not help us get groceries. There would be weeks. And keep in mind, where, you know, my mother's disabled. She can't move properly. She's also obese. You know, she very, very sick herself in a lot of ways. And my mother's brother kept telling her, I'm going to help you. I'm going to get you health insurance. I'm going to get you to the doctor. And when my mother finally had a stroke in 2018, I was told by the doctor that this tumor had been in her brain for 3 fucking years. And then that's when I realized that my mother's brother was lying to me and lying to her at all times. And just strung us along and just failed in every capacity to provide any assistance whatsoever. And then actively prevented us from trying to assist ourselves. And around this time was when streaming for me became lucrative. 2017 was when I started making money streaming. And most, if not like a super majority, of the money I made streaming went to food, medical stuff. This was around when I started, you know, figuring out the whole gender thing. And, you know, I started, you know, I'm, you know, 21 at the time. And, you know, I start talking to my mom, and it's like, is he, like, is your brother gonna actually do anything? Like, I've got money. I can help us now. I can buy food now. And, like, I told, like, there was this moment where, like, she was so happy when I started to make money doing the live streaming stuff. Because then she felt like she could eat again. You know, she would go weeks without eating. And it's like, oh, we can order food now. And we didn't get along. Like we did not get along. she would get to the point where she would ask me to buy her ice cream every day. And like I said before, I was born and raised on ice cream and McDonald's. And then, you know, when we moved to Maryland and my mother was completely at the behest of her brother and I had no income, you know, she, like my brother, or my mother's brother would not allow her to have any unhealthy food. And so when I started getting money, she would start begging me, like, please get me ice cream. And I didn't want to. This was around when I started losing weight. I was like, I wanted to take my diet seriously. I want to lose weight. I went from 250 pounds to 130 pounds. And I didn't want to, and we fought a lot over that. Over, you know, she knew I had money to buy her ice cream, and I didn't do it. And that she hated me for that. She resented me, and I resented her for, and I know it sounds ridiculous. I get it, but it's like, I don't know. I was not remotely as intelligent and eloquent as I am now at this point in time. But you know, once I started making money, my mother's brother expected me all of a sudden to start, you know, he said, oh, you gotta pay me back for helping you all these years. And it's like, yeah, you provided me with a home, but like, what else have you done? And so we got into disputes over that. I you know, said I would, if I'm making a couple $1,000s a month, I would rather put that into helping my mother recover, because she was getting really sick at the time. A lot, like she had a lot of like mental health problems, you know, like a lot of physical health problems. And I was like, I'd rather put the money into that because you're not helping. And then we got into a lot of disagreements. And then my mother had a stroke in 2018. And I'm going to end this video on this subject. Is that my mother had a stroke in 2018 because she had a brain tumor that the doctors told me had been there for at least 3 years. They said that this had been there for at least 3 years. That's what I was told. At least 3 years. And then when my mother's brother came, it was like, oh, how could this happen? Then he moved my mother to a different medical facility. Keep in mind, like, I was living with my mother in his spare home. So my mother was no longer there because she was in the hospital. He moved her to a different medical facility, didn't tell me where it was, wouldn't take me there. So my mom had a stroke. I accompanied her to the hospital, and then my mom's brother moved her to a different hospital and refused to let me see her. And then over the next few months, you know, things just kind of fell apart. And I ended up getting, you know, my mother's other brother moved in with me. And he was a complete piece of shit. Like a Trump, like a hardcore Trumper, hated gay people, hated trans people. And this was like, you know, I have already been on medication for a year now at this point. You know, I'm out. And he, you know, would get drunk every night and then threaten to kill me often. And I would just, you know, he would say like, you know, I spent my whole life hating gay people and now I'm forced to live with one. And it just bother me and just fucking harass me about it. And it was so, and I told my mother's other brother, the rich one, about this and was like, I can't, this is untenable. And that basically culminated in them, you know, just harassing the ever-loving shit out of me until the point where I had to move. And I moved, I started talking to my half-brother again, and then I moved down to North Carolina, and that's kind of like an abridged situation, but yeah, that's my upbringing. I don't know. That's my upbringing. And ever since I've moved to North Carolina, I feel like I finally have a chance. I feel like now, for the first time in my life, I actually have control. I actually have agency. I actually am my own person. I'm actually not at the whim of other people. I don't need to be told I don't need to deal with people constantly hating me. I don't need to live with abusive family members anymore. And that's like, this is the first year of my life where I've actually felt comfortable being alive. And again, it's magical. It's totally magical. So thank you for watching. This has been all over the place. But I'll see you later. And hopefully this is good. Hopefully this is at least entertaining. Hopefully you learn more about me. That's what I'm here for. You know? I'm activated now. You know, like that's the thing, is like I'm activated. My life experience combined with the whole, you know, maybe I'll go into more the whole campaign side of things. But it's like, I'm activated, I am who I am, and I'm gonna spend the rest of my life making sure that nobody has to go through what I went through. And that's the goal. So, again, thank you for watching. I'll see you later. Hopefully you show up in the next one. It's only gonna get more and more fun as these videos go on. So, I'll see ya.